first of all, before we get to this thing about what's going on in Iraq, we're seeing 900 cities around the world having, this International Day of Occupy. All right, this has grown from Wall Street. You and I had a conversation, I don't know, 6 months, a year ago or something about, why aren't the young people in the streets? And kind of came to the conclusion that there's no draft, there's not that much pain. But now we've got 30% unemployment among youth, and many of these kids have student loans that are crushing them. Isn't that the new draft?
It's a good question. Tom, we were discussing why the young people were not out in the streets against the wars.
Right.
As to this, it always happens unexpectedly. It's predictable. There's very little organizational hand behind it. So, yes, overall, it's a huge, spontaneous, worldwide cry of protest against the absence of an economic future. Where it goes, who knows?
Yeah. And we've both seen a whole variety of cycles and spin-offs from these things.
Exactly.
It's going to be very interesting to follow this. You're reporting that the Associated Press is reporting, or the AP is reporting, and this is kind of now dropped into the rabbit hole. The administration isn't commenting on it, and it's like the media just went silent on this. But I thought this was a really big deal that by the end of this year, Obama is going to do what?
According to the Associated Press report, which I have no reason to doubt, the president is going to withdraw the last 48,000 American troops from Iraq. That's a saving of about $50 billion a year, and that's that. For the past couple of years, there's been a lot of anxiety about this. And a lot of argument about whether the United States was going to leave a residual force behind. It's not. Repeat, it's not. A lot of people, I think, are startled by this in the anti-war movement, perhaps because you become jaded after 10 years or you don't believe whatever the government says. I don't know the reason. It's perfectly explainable to me. It was Obama's intention, and the Iraqis themselves are divided about it. They just can't make up their minds. And the Pentagon has wanted immunity for any remaining American troops, and they're not going to get immunity. So all the troops are going to be out. That's a tribute to the 10 years of the anti-war movement. We need to protect that outcome, and it's a tribute to all those in Iraq who want self-determination and have opposed the occupation. There may be wiggle room at the end of the year. There may be Americans in large numbers at the embassy. There may be continuous discussions about a training force. But all that is a kind of a public relations cover for the fact that the government we installed at the force of the Pentagon is unable to ask us to stay, even on a token level. So I think it's over, but I agree with you. It's quite puzzling that the New York Times and the mainstream media refuses to call it. They're just not prepared to call it. Well, and a lot of people at my blog site don't believe it either. I'm seeing a credibility gap out there among the peace activists. They just don't believe it.
Yeah, it seems that well, first of all, this was one of President Obama's campaign promises, so he'll be keeping that. That's going to help him with his reelection in 2012, assuming that Iraq doesn't completely disintegrate when we leave. And secondly, this is something that Bush had set up in 2008, as this was the date. And so it's, everything has been moving in that direction anyway. And third, it's going to save money, which is, something that is in short supply right now, given that the Republicans, won't raise taxes, blah-de-blah, and on rich people anyway. But so it seems like, there's a positive political equation here. But also, this Pew study came out yesterday showing that on a 4-to-1 ratio, the Republicans are getting favorable coverage in the press and the president is getting unfavorable coverage in the press. And I wonder if that might have something to do with it. This is a good story for him, so therefore let's ignore it.
I'm not that cynical, but I don't know the reason. I think it's more that the mainstream media, the New York Times, considers itself in part attached to the national security establishment.
Right, the old Judith Miller syndrome.
No, I don't mean the most extreme elements, but just generally, they have a hard time wrapping their journalistic mind around the idea that the superpower could be forced to leave a country entirely. It's not entire, but it's pretty close to 100%. And so they're going slow on covering the story, but the story is the story. I followed it very closely the past year. Of course, I'm in favor of all the troops getting out, but I've been predicting that they were going to have a token 3,000 or 4,000 remaining as kind of a fig leaf. That was recommended by Leon Panetta. But the Iraqi parliament is tied up, is unable to pass a law giving immunity to any American troops staying behind. And so that's the excuse or pretext or explanation. And the Pentagon will not leave troops there who might wind up in an Iraqi courtroom if they violate Iraqi laws. So I think what's going to happen, if you want to be cynical, and I'm not cynical, I think this is a historic achievement. They're going to move the American troops that would have stayed in Iraq over into Kuwait in case some situation arises where they have to come back in.
Right.
I don't think that's going to happen either, but that's the predictable redeployment of forces that I see.
Tom, in the minute we have left, there are some who are suggesting that the next big battle is going to be in the Middle East, and it's going to be simply Shia-Sunni. And you've got Shia Iran now, opening banks and being very active in what was Sunni-controlled Iraq, but is Shia-majority Iraq. And that, in many ways, the Bush administration blew it by taking out Saddam Hussein, who was kind of stabilizing that region. And now it's Saudi Arabia versus Iran. Quick thoughts on that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's beyond the capacity of most people to even begin to understand. But the United States supported Saddam Hussein in his war against Iran. We forget that. Nobody over there forgets it. Right. Secondly, the United States displaced a Sunni regime from Iraq and put in a majority Shia regime. Everybody knows that. That regime in Iraq is close to Iran, and the minority group there, the Sunni, are aligned with the Saudis.
Right.
So the Saudis have been lobbying us to stay in Iraq, and it looks like the pro-Iranian forces have won the outcome.
Yeah. So George Bush just handed it to Iran. It's amazing. Tom,
you figure.
Tom, yeah, exactly. Tom Hayden, TomHayden.com. Thanks, Tom.